Wargamers, welcome back to the channel, Death from Above Wargaming. I'm Aaron, and I'm coming back with some more exciting Alpha Strike Battlytics. We're going to dive into our round 2 of our Battlytics tournament. So just a recap for you guys, we had 24 of our veteran patrons enter in a lance to see who was going to come out on top. Now, because there were 24 teams, we did a seeded single elimination style tournament. So we had our top 8 teams basically get a bye round, and the initial 16, or the bottom 16 teams, I should say, had to fight it out in round 1. So let's take a look at some of the results coming out of round 1, and then I'll show you which one we're going to take a look at today. Basically, all the teams in red, unfortunately, didn't make it into round 2. The green teams did advance, so you can see all of those teams that were highlighted in green on the outside brackets advanced into the second round, where those seeded teams were lying in wait. So these are going to be some interesting matchups and some exciting stuff here ahead for sure. What I decided to do was focus on that top right-hand bracket. So we're going to look at tonight and in a subsequent video, Will's Deadmen against Ion Radio, the Ion Raiders, and then we're also going to look at the Kanagawa Crushers, who just eked out a victory in round 1 against Thunder Rolls. So these are going to be some really great matchups, and then we're going to follow this bracket all the way through into the final round. Well, I guess the semifinals. We'll see if one of these teams makes it into the finals. So the semifinals, at least, likely we will do some deep dives into a couple of those, probably both of the final 4 matchups. All right, so guys, stick around. What we're going to do tonight, we're going to take a look at Will's Deadmen against the Ion Raiders. So this is sure to be a very good matchup, some tough competition here. So stick around, you're not going to want to miss it. All right, guys, here we are. We're going to take a look at Will's Deadmen against the Ion Raiders. So Will's Deadmen, they seeded second place in the entire tournament. And what that was, basically, I ran simulations against a lance of my own design. Every team, every 24 of the 24 lances, everybody had to face the same exact lance of my design, and I ranked them basically by the results of that battle. And I think I did maybe 10 or maybe it was 20 simulations. I don't remember at this point. Feels like forever ago. But Will's Deadmen came in second place, so pretty good. They had a very high efficiency score. Meanwhile, the Ion Raiders, they had a pretty strong showing against the Rolling Sevens. Rolling Sevens, I thought, was a very tough opponent. Ion Raiders actually seeded 15th, so we're talking 15th seed against second seed here in round 2. Let's see what happens here. So let's look at the lance comps. Will's Deadmen, love the custom logo that was sent over here. Just a coffin. Hopefully not a harbinger of what is to come for this lance. I like the comp overall. Archer, very good. Grasshopper, solid. Black Knight, Phoenix Hawk. These are all mechs that we've seen throughout the tournament. Very prevalent designs. I like the overheat on the Archer. I like the armor on the Grasshopper and the Archer. The Black Knight with the overheat too, very potent. This Phoenix Hawk's a little different. We've seen a lot of Phoenix Hawk 1Ks. This is just the Phoenix Hawk, PXH1. So this is a little different. It does have jump jets, a little bit less armor, and slightly less damage at short range. I still think it's a pretty solid design. Maybe a little bit costly because of those jump jets, some other things there that drive the price up. But still overall very good, good mech there. I think overall, if you look in the bottom right, the point value distribution, the lance is pretty balanced, and it totals in at 148 points. So pretty good use of the total pool of points there. If we look at the force metrics, armor on this lance jumps out very good. Damage, typically we've seen them around 3 here, and this weighted damage is right around 3 as well, so very good. Skill value is a little high. You'll notice the Archer, the Grasshopper, both skill 4. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And then structure, speed, also pretty much on par with what we've seen from the other teams. So let's talk about roles for these mechs. That Archer in a Vanguard role and skill 4, I don't know how I feel about that. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I mean, with such good long and extreme range damage, my instinct is probably a skill 3 or better for that mech. I think the Grasshopper is right where it should be in a pursuit role at skill 4. It's going to be at medium range. Forget the 0-star at long. It's not doing crap for you. Don't burn points making this thing a high skill, especially when you have to deal with a very finite point cap, 150 points. Black Knight looks good. Now, what's interesting is this isn't a pursuit role. That means it's going to run in real hard and try to get, basically fire on the closest target as quick as it can. With the Overheat 2, maybe that will be effective, or maybe this thing will just get melted. 6 armor, 6 structure, still pretty solid though. And then the Phoenix Hawk in a Vanguard role at a Veteran skill 3. Might have been just a points thing there. This is one I would have run at skill 4 and maybe salvage some of those points for something else, but we'll see how it goes. Let's take a look at the Ion Raiders. Now, nothing has changed here, so if you guys haven't watched the round 1 review, I would recommend doing that. Just a couple of points of note here. When you submit your lance, your skill, your role, all of those things are fixed throughout the tournament, so none of this has changed for the Ion Raiders. But a couple of important points of note. The Rifleman 3N, again, I think it's a solid mech. Those Riflemans, I like them because they're cheap, but they are scary because they only have 4 pips of armor. And for a 60-ton mech, it can do a lot of damage with the Overheat too, so they do tend to get primed and melted pretty quick. I think the Awesome is a great mech. Marauder, obviously one of my favorites. I tend to favor the 3R over the 3D. And then the Phoenix Hawk, very good as well. We talked about this last time. I think the role may be dangerous. It panned out for John last round. This round, we'll see. It isn't a pursuit role. I think I would start it more on the outside, like a strike roll or something along those lines, and have it work its way in. Let other bigger mechs pick up some fire first. I think running this thing right up the gut, especially considering it doubles the speed of the Awesome, it may get destroyed pretty quickly, but we'll see. All right, let's check out Will's Dead Men first. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the overall lance statistics here. So rated versus actual damage here, what do we see? Well, it's not really doing as much as you might expect at long and extreme range. Extreme range is always fussy, especially because if the enemy mechs close too quickly, you really don't get an opportunity to shoot at that range bracket. Long is a little bit concerning. I think that has to do with the skill level of the mechs. I think what it's delivering versus what is expected is, it's substantially off, and those early game pips can really make a difference later in the game. Medium range, it's doing well. Short range, it's performing as expected. Let's take a look at the battle metrics. So Will's Deadman delivering 48.5% of the overall damage on the table, taking 51.5%. Obviously, those things are corollaries. What we see is a pretty clean curve. Things ramp up around turn 3 and 4, and then obviously as mechs start to fall off the field, it tapers off towards the end. Heat is pretty standard. I mean, this is what you would expect if you had to plot what you think a game of Alpha Strike would look like. It would pretty much look like this, right? A lot of mid-game damage, a lot of late-game heat. So I'm not seeing anything standing out here. What is interesting, though, is the differentiation between damage taken and damage dealt. It almost mirrors one for the other. I would say, maybe these guys are outperforming Ion Raiders in turns 5 and 6, but, you can see largely early in the game, those Ion Raiders doing more damage than the Dead Men are able to deliver. So survivability, this lance overall, what are we at there? 23.5%. And then in the middle here, just looking at the deployment of these mechs. So all of these mechs on Will's Dead Men in Pursuit or Vanguard roles. That means you're deploying them tight in the middle, and you're just basically pushing up the gut. Meanwhile, the Ion Raiders a little bit more spread out. So we'll see if that, how that plays in and if it plays in. The efficiency analysis here, so overall, you know, and we'll dive into each one of these mechs individually, but that Grasshopper really, really outperforming the overall Lance. The overall Lance efficiency was 95.6%, so pretty good. The Black Knight and the Phoenix Hawk underperforming, but again, those Black Knights, you know, I think we've seen this in a couple of the other reviews. Anything around 100 typically tends to be good. I mean, this guy's probably around, well, let me find out here for you exactly. It's about 79%. So I would say anything 80% and higher is pretty good. I mean, 79% right on the cusp there. It's probably because it's in that pursuit role. It's running in, it's dying, but it's still able to do some damage, so not too bad there. Grasshopper really doing well, so obviously deployed effectively there. Let's take a look at each of the individual mechs and see how they do. Okay, so this Archer 2R, you can see early in the game, the battle metrics should jump out, right? Look at all that gold area. That is your early game damage there. And again, I think if this were a skill 3, you know, that area would be, there'd be a lot more area under that curve. And I think, you know, that would have paid dividends for this particular mech. It does well. It doesn't get primed up because it's got so much armor. There are easier things like that Phoenix Hawk to kill, to wipe 2 or 3 points of damage off the table. And this Archer with overheat, it's not really leveraging the overheat that much. It is later in the game, but earlier in the game, you know, obviously it's probably at long range, or it doesn't have those kill shots, so it's not really taking advantage of it. Survivability overall, net survivability 33.1%. Not bad at all. Definitely not bad at all. So I would say, you know, this mech probably doing its job. I mean, if you look at the armor degradation, it's pretty smooth. There is an inflection around turn 6 or turn 7. That's where you see the red area on the battle metrics spike up. Overall, though, I mean, no complaints. I think this Archer isn't doing anything particularly spectacular, but it's not really doing anything bad either. So probably well deployed. Again, I think you probably eke a little bit more out on a skill 3, but that's just my opinion on that. Efficiency for this mech over 100%, so very happy with that. Now moving on to the Grasshopper, this one really stood out to me. Look at that damage. I mean, this thing just sprints in, and by turn 4, actually, it's just dishing damage out, and quite a bit of it. You know, 2 points on average, a little over 2 points on average, but again, we're talking about sometimes you're hitting, sometimes you're missing, but again, that kind of average damage is pretty reliable. It's doing 20% of the overall damage on the table, which I think is fantastic. What's interesting is if you look at the movement pattern for this mech, it definitely, I think towards the end of the game, it gets primed up. And I think in this particular simulation where I pulled some of these, this plot out of, I think it's the last mech alive, and it tries to put a little bit of range in between itself and some of the other mechs. That's why you see it kind of tail off at the top there. But overall survivability for this mech across the 2,500 simulations, very good, you know, over 75% there. And, you know, if you look at the armor degradation on average, right? So if you were to flip a coin, you know, most games, average game, you're not even getting into the structure of this mech. So it's really not taking critical hits, which is reflected by the battle metrics in the middle there. So those bottom 2 icons, right? You see 3.5, that's the number of critical hits this thing delivered. It only took 0.9 critical hits per average on a game. So that's a good ROI. That's a solid mech, delivering a ton more damage than it's taking. And that's why the efficiency is so high, so 160%. So this mech in this Lance deployed in this particular position, I think really well done. And just a reminder, this is a skill 4 pilot, right? So you don't necessarily need, you know, skill 2s all the time to have a highly performing mech. It just needs to be used correctly. And I think for this particular mech, it's big, it's meaty, it can sustain damage to get in even if it's being shot. And then once it's in medium range, the thing is just absolutely monstrous. And you can see it does a very good job. Its average range to target 6.5 inches. And remember, we're talking 1-to-1 scale here. So that is medium range, and that's exactly where this mech wants to be. Okay, the Black Knight. So, this thing gets primed up hard. You can see it starts to do damage on turn 3. It gets that long range fire into play. But then turn 4, turn 5, I mean, this is like death for this mech. And you can see the survivability curve, the armor analysis, right? It's just, by turn 4, turn 5, it's in internal structure. It's taking critical hits. It's taking 3.1 critical hits on average per game. I think the pursuit roll for this one, maybe not ideal, maybe more of a direct fire roll, or even a second line where you hold it back, let it hit at long or medium, and then rush in, use that overheat. Speaking of which, you can see this thing does build up quite a bit of heat on average. This is on average in 2,500 games. It's basically a 2 heat every game by turn 7. So, if it's alive, it is overheating, and it is it's just laying down as much damage as it can. But it's not enough. This mech only delivering 10.9% of the overall damage pool. Again, 12.5 is break even, so this is under average there. It is, taking a substantial amount of fire, which, you want, from these big heavies. You want them to absorb some damage, but I think this thing is missing some of its opportunity to retaliate. So that's why we're seeing a low efficiency on this one. The Phoenix Hawk, jumping into that, similarly, I mean, this thing gets in quick, but it is one of the first things. And what's interesting is the damage spike on this one is at turn 3. So that's typically long range fire. And I've said this a million times about these speed 6 mechs. It's like an illusion. Their TMM is really not that high. A 2 TMM, you think of Phoenix Hawk, you're like, man, that's really fast. It's really not. TMM of 2 by raw is just not going to sway, things in your favor. I mean, you're really going to need like a TMM 3 in some cases to start to see like a return on that. These things can't dodge fire the way I think we all want them to in our heads. It's basically the same speed as a Wolverine, or a Shadowhawk or something like that. But anyway, this thing gets in, it tries its best, does 4% of the damage. That's it. Only does 4% of the damage, and speaking of 4%, it only survives 4% of the 2,500 simulations. So that's pretty bad. And you can see the survivability is like, it's like just plummets. Drops off real hard between turn 3 and 4. So by the time you're at turn 4, I mean, you're internal, you're taking criticals, you're a couple pips from death. So efficiency on this guy, 38.3%, unfortunate. Was hoping for more out of the Phoenix Hawk, but again, if you're deploying these types of smaller mechs, and the Phoenix Hawk is a smaller mech, when we're talking about Marauders, Awesomes, things along those lines, I think they needed to be deployed on the outside or held back in reserve until some of the bigger mechs can take some fire. But still, overall, the Deadmen did damage. I mean, they definitely did a lot of damage, but they took a little bit more. If it's one thing I remember about the Ion Raiders is, they're sturdy, right? They have good armor, they have good structure. So, was it enough? I don't know, guys. Let's take a look at the Ion Raiders and see how they performed, and then we'll check out the final analysis. All right, here we are, the Ion Raiders. Let's take a look at some of the land statistics here. So in comparison to Will's Deadmen, the first thing I notice here is the long-range damage is substantially better. Their long range overall at 20%, for rated, and actuals hovering somewhere or maybe around 12% or so. If that translates, because if you look at the battle metrics, you can see they're doing more damage early in the game, turn 2, turn 3, turn 4. And when the rest of the game is generally a dead heat for damage, that could make or break, in terms of who wins and who loses. So let's dive in and see how this lance did in more detail. So 51.5% of the overall damage on the table was done by the Ion Raiders. Survivability for this lance was 34.5%. You can see in the center there, that formation, a little bit more spread out. The Rifleman, the Phoenix Hawk, both of those guys on the wings, that Awesome and Marauder centrally deployed. Overall here, I'm looking at efficiency. Rifleman and Phoenix Hawk very close. They're underperforming, probably hovering in the 60 percentile range. That Awesome and the Marauder, though, doing very, very well, well over 100%, 130, 140% there. The overall Lance average efficiency, though, is 96.2%. Will's Deadman, I believe, was 95.3%. So very, very close between these two Lances, 95 and change. Now I got to go back and look. 95.6. Okay, so 95.6 versus 96.2. That is very close. So let's dive into some of the individual mechs here for the Ion Raiders. Let's start with the Awesome. So this is a skill 3 mech, and it really, really delivers. You can see here it's got damage across the board. It starts early, turn 2, all the way to turn 10. This thing is just delivering some pain. By the time it gets into turn 5, turn 6, and beyond, it's averaging about 2 points of damage per turn. And remember, these averages factor in, every simulation, whether you're dead or alive, it averages the damage. So for a mech that survives 70% of the time, dealing that kind of average damage is very good. It lays down 21.5% of the overall damage on the table. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, yes, the Grasshopper was 20%, so this Awesome is the #1 damage dealer on the table. Took 11.4% of the damage, survived very well, barely took any criticals, 1.4 on average, and those come on very late in the game. The mech moves in quick, it gets into medium range, and it tries to stay there. It doesn't really have any interest in getting into point blank range, even though the damage is the same, but the TN would be a little bit better. Apparently the AI believes that, staying at medium range, and I think this too, especially when you have the upper hand, is better, right? I mean, if I am not damaged going into turn 6, I'm not going to give my opponent an opportunity. I'm going to keep him at range for as long as I can. So that's consistent with at least how I would play this. But anyway, overall efficiency for this mech, 136%, so really, really good there. Jumping down to the Marauder. All right, so the Marauder here, solid performer. I mentioned this earlier. I like the 3R because it does a little bit more damage at long range, but the 3D also still very strong. You can see this mech delivering damage immediately. It sprints turn 1, and it basically immediately starts doing damage on turn 2, all the way through to the end. It does get primed up pretty hard in turns 5 and 6. You can see that this mech's survivability not as great as that Awesome. So 25.4%. This thing definitely takes some critical hits. And if you look at the armor analysis, right around turn 5, turn 6 is where you see that inflection point, and it goes internal. So almost every game, you're going to be expecting this mech to take some damage, take some crits, taking about 2.5 crits per game. But overall, again, solid performer. It's doing more damage than it's taking. It's hanging in there. It's alive at the end of the game 25% of the time. That's not bad. So overall, I think really solid performance, 120.8%. What contributed to that? Marauders just love just being in the middle, being able to do damage, having a good pilot in them. I think all of that really contributes to the success here. I think if this were a 3R, and of course, it's my bias. I love the 3R in Alpha Strike. I think this mech would have done even better because you would have gotten a little bit more early game damage. But overall, still, very, very solid performance out of this Marauder. Now we get into the, the C students here. This Rifleman, again, it's an okay mech. I think it's good to fill out points. It's just one of those things that just, I don't know, they don't seem to perform well. I think the 4D does a lot better. It's that 4 pips of armor. It's just so easy to get internal hits on this thing. But it is deployed in a direct fire role, which I think is good, but it is a regular skill level, skill 4. I don't know. For a mech that you're going to keep at range, you probably want a better pilot in it. But let's take a look at the numbers here. So what's interesting is the damage taken. This thing gets primed up immediately, right? Because if you see a Rifleman on the board, you're like, ooh, I can hit it a couple times and start dealing critical hits to this thing. So the OPFOR does that, and then they switch off it on turn 3. Based on the other damage curves, I'm going to assume it switches off to the Phoenix Hawk. We'll see. But then they get right back on this mech on turn 5. But, is it too late? I don't know. If you look at the armor analysis and the survivability, it's surprisingly not bad. So maybe the Phoenix Hawk dives on the sword and keeps the Rifleman alive. But, this Rifleman, again, not really able to deliver damage, delivering less than, on average, 1 point per turn. But it is consistent damage. It is even trying to overheat. You can see, basically by turn 9, turn 10, it has, on average, 1 point of heat. So not really taking full advantage of that overheat too. And I think, again, it's a combination of missing hits, being in a direct fire role, not having the right skill level, having mediocre damage to begin with. Anyway, this thing ended up at about a 65.8% efficiency score. Again, it's a C student. It's not a total fail, but, we would expect a little bit more. Only dealing 5.7% of the total damage on the table. Definitely would want a little bit more out of a 60-ton mech, but such is life. Now, the Phoenix Hawk on the Ion Raider side. So this is a 1K, 3 damage at short, 2 damage at medium. We've seen this thing has the potential to perform well. In this particular lance, I've said it once, I've said it 16 times, I'll say it for the 17th time. Pursuit roll, not what I think is ideal for this mech. And you can see it runs in, and then turn 3, turn 4, it just gets absolutely blitzed. It ends up taking its damage, though, like a champ, 12.4%, but it's only able to deal 7.4% in return, and it's dead most of the time. Only survives 7.8%. And you can see that survivability curve. It's like one of those log rides. I mean, it just plummets off. By turn 3, most of the time you're in internal structure. Most certainly by turn 4, and then by turn 5 you're probably dead, which is unfortunate because you can see in the efficiency analysis, this thing's able to start doing damage. The efficiency spikes up early, and then it just can't continue on with that. So the efficiency ends up at 62.6%. Again, it's a C student. It's not a total fail. Like the Rifleman, it could be better. And I think this is one where this Phoenix Hawk I would do a skill 4. I would put it in a strike roll. I would take those points and I would either upgrade the Rifleman to a skill 3, or I would, upgrade the mech to something else. I'm not sure what. Maybe, like I said, the Centurion or something like that. Because the Centurion does 3 at medium. You can just kind of run that thing in, have it at skill 4 and do some damage. So anyway, so we looked at all the mechs. Let's take a look at the final results. All right, here we are, the force comparison of Will's Deadmen against the Ion Raiders. You can see the key force markers up top. Both of these lances are very, very close. The Deadmen in the lighter green there, the Raiders in the darker green. So Will's Deadmen actually with a little bit more armor here than the Ion Raiders. But we know the Ion Raiders doing a little bit more damage. So which one came out on top? Well, you can see it here on the screen, guys. What I think is incredible is just very, very close. The overall damage dealt within a couple of points. The kills per game within a 10th. The Ion Raiders a little bit more accurate, actually 5% or so more accurate. And the survivability really is what I think is key. So the dark gray on the survivability there is the Ion Raiders. The more white color here is the Deadmen. So the Deadmen at about 29%, I believe that says, for survivability, and 34.5% for the Ion Raiders. And guys, that's really what it came down to. So the Ion Raiders winning 52.6% of the matches. The Deadmen only winning 47.3%. Another really close matchup. And you can see it reflected in the numbers. As far as efficiency goes, both lances very close within, sort of almost less than 1% of each other. Was at 0.8 if my math is correct. Actually less, 0.6. And so, is what it is. So why do I think that the Ion Raiders pulled this one out? Well, again, we're running 2,500 games, so this wasn't a fluke. I think what it comes down to is you've got tougher mechs that are staying at range. They're kiting when they need to kite. They're doing slightly more criticals. They're throwing more dice down. They're hitting more often. They're getting the kills when it counts. That's just what it comes down to. I think, when you look at the efficiency analysis, that Archer was an underperformer on the Deadmen. I think a skill 3 Archer and maybe rejigger some of the other mechs could have been a game changer. I think the rolls on the Deadmen, maybe move that Black Knight into a direct fire or something else, not a pursuit. I think that could have been a game changer. I think the Grasshopper did great, but I think largely the Grasshopper did great is because it ran around the battlefield largely unshot at, because these other mechs like the Black Knight, were in point blank so quickly, and they were just easier targets to kill. And 3 damage, 4 damage, right? I mean, the overheat 2 on the Black Knight, very scary. So that I think was a big difference there. If that Black Knight could have survived a little bit longer, I think the Deadmen may have been able to pull it out. But alas, guys, it's March Madness. This is what happens. So congratulations to the Ion Raiders again, just eking out another win. So who will they be up against next? Well, we got to find out, guys. So stay tuned. We've got a lot of excitement coming your way. I've got another one of these round 2 reviews in the same sort of bracket, if you will. And the winner of that one will move on to face the Ion Raiders. So you're not going to want to miss that. So keep an eye out for it. Other than that, guys, I'm all wrapped up. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this exciting Lance review from our Alpha Strike Battletics engine. And of course, stay tuned. Always great stuff coming from Death from Above Wargaming. Have a good night.